Kevin? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
It's easy feeling as long as you came. They get by a minute into force. Oh, I didn't notice the struggle in forward. But only when got me back, just finally got me here. I didn't think it ever come.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cannabis and Coffee with Tamarijuana. This morning it's snowing again out in the East Kootenays, and I'm getting tired of the snow. I'm sure that most of you are too, except for I guess there's probably rain on the West Coast from now. This morning I'd like to welcome Jamie Shaw. She has been the director of the BC Compassion Club, president of the Canadian Association of Medical Cannabis Dispensaries, co-founder of the Women's Grows First Canadian chapter, and she's lobbied successfully for the dispensary licenses in Vancouver and Victoria and other municipalities. She's also appeared as an expert witness in the Allard case. I'd like to welcome Jamie. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning.
How are you doing this morning?
Oh, not too bad. We've got rain here finally in Vancouver instead of snow. It's a nice change of pace.
Yeah, I guess everybody was running for salt a few weeks ago out there, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of snow on the ground. Stayed a lot longer than normal.
Yeah, we've got a lot out here too, which, is normal for the mountain ranges, but we've got a lot more this year than we've ever had too.
Yeah,
so anyways,
it's understandable.
And I mean, the weather kind of makes everybody's depression levels and stuff go up and down too, which is, another reason why a lot of people use cannabis is for anxiety and depression, right?
Totally, especially here on the West Coast where you get those gray days when even if it's not raining, you get 90 days of gray in a row, which has been proven to actually have detrimental effects on mental health.
Absolutely. Why, the Allard case was so important because of the fact that when, the MMPR came into effect, they literally took away patients' therapeutic, ability to garden themselves, which in a lot of cases it helps, the forest sunshine helps a lot of people's, depression, right? So you were very instrumental in that trial, were you not?
I ended up being, yeah. I mean, I was giving testimony on dispensaries, which is pretty much outside of the scope of the trial, but Justice Phelan wrote up a big paragraph on it in his final ruling, calling dispensaries the heart of access, and it was a bit of a surprise.
Well, that's the worst part about it. That in the Allard case itself, stating that dispensaries are the center of, yet they're still busting one like that one that opened yesterday, for example, in Langdon there, and then was it Landon? I'm not even sure how to say that.
Langford.
Langford. Yeah, and within hours, the RCMP were there.
And Ottawa's been constant. I mean, you're not hearing much about it very often, but Ottawa's been constantly closing them, and they've been reopening. It's the same pattern in every jurisdiction, right?
Right. And I don't know, I'm kind of flabbergasted. Hence why, out here, it's kind of funny too, because we're only 35 kilometers from Kimberley, right? And now they've got a second dispensary license, and they opened, actually, I think today's their opening. And Cranbrook, the mayor is no. There's no way until it's legal, and you've got no. And I mean, we've been shut down I don't know how many times on trying, and we just get no. You want to get busted? No. It's just I don't know. Like I said, Vancouver and Victoria are entities all on their own.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of municipalities are following their lead. I mean, Penticton is now licensing. You mentioned Kimberley is, Gibson's is, Grand Forks is. Nanaimo's been wrestling with theirs for quite a while. So I mean, it's moving here in BC at any rate, but other municipalities still keep wanting to follow the same pattern and keep making the same mistakes. It's frustrating.
Very, yeah. And you go and you were just over on the island in Nanaimo were for a city council something that was going on too. They were
I
looking at
was,
bylaws.
yeah. They like for us to stay over there when we go to speak. They just start pushing things back on the agenda until all the flights and buses out have been canceled, and most people end up leaving. But yeah, they had a report about a year ago. I guess we went to council and got them to agree to have staff write up a report. We then went and met with staff who were writing up the report. It just has not come back to council yet, and other issues around dispensaries have come up, and the mayor, the last time I was there, the mayor had actually tried to put through something on dispensaries, even though they still hadn't looked at the report. But there's a lot of internal conflict on the council there, so it's been a really interesting thing to kind of watch. It looks more like a grade 2 class than a council, but, you know.
Well, that's what I wonder, like, with the new regulations too, like if they bring them back to the municipalities, kind of like how it happened in Colorado, like state, county to county, right? Like if municipalities opt out on even legalization, because there was something mentioned here last week that the city council was going to be looking at bylaws on the four plant count for legalization. And I'm thinking, you guys are kind of putting the cart before the horse, because that's just a recommendation. Nothing has come out through legislation yet either. So, it's kind of disheartening to realize that within BC, there's so many different pockets that, because I'm sitting right in the middle of Nelson, Cruston's only an hour away, Kimberley's like 25 minutes away. And I can't seem to get a foothold, or anybody else, not just myself. I'm not the only one that has attempted, right? So, how did you got started with the BC Compassion Club though originally? So, did you start, like, how did you get going to begin with, like, in this whole rigmarole of cannabis prohibition activism?
Well, I actually, back in, I think it was 1998, somewhere around there, I had a doctor who had diagnosed me with anxiety for the first time. First time I'd ever heard that diagnosis, and I actually thought it was kind of funny because my lifestyle at the time, I'd lived in New York and Toronto, and here I was in peaceful Vancouver being told I had anxiety. I thought that was kind of funny, but he sent me to the club, and I'd been smoking cannabis for years and years and years, but until I had accessed the club, I'd never really had access to specific strains. You'd get what the guy had, and maybe it was what he was telling you it was, and maybe it wasn't. And if you really liked it, you probably weren't going to get it again. And, it's very different. Being able to access the same strains consistently and track them and figure out which ones worked for me and which ones didn't totally changed my use. And I mean, that's dispensaries provided that. Nothing else has provided that in North America, is that consistent, safe access, that's the licensed producers are now building on.
Right. But I mean, the dispensaries are still, like, the forefront of, where we're where we should still be heading. I feel that, I'm sure you hear that almost every single day. Licensed producers have a place in the industry. Absolutely. Like, I'm not everybody goes, well, you're anti-licensed producer. I'm not anti-licensed producer. I'm anti-corporate takeover. I'm not we all need dignified access, and if they have a place because they can, because the supply and demand, the demand is so high,
exactly.
Dispensaries are still instrumental.
It's also the knowledge, that's a big piece. It's not so much, the dispensary model is fine, but if you get rid of everybody in it and fill it with new people, you've still dismantled something that was working, There's a lot of stories lately about, bud tenders get things wrong sometimes. It's like, of course they do. There's no centralized training program. The number of dispensary employees is growing astronomically. There's no way they can all be trained on everything that's going on. But at the same time, that knowledge is there. It's in the dispensaries.
Right. Well, I mean, basic knowledge of cannabis, most of them ask for that. I'm sure. Like, you don't just walk into a dispensary and say, "Hey, man, can I have a job?" and not have any education. Like, I couldn't imagine
exactly.
One of them.
And you learn a lot doing the job too. Once you're on the job for a short period of time, you've heard an awful lot of stories, and you've started to figure out an awful lot of things. Well,
do you find that people actually that do come that want to work in the dispensaries are people that are open-minded, anyways, right? They're not. You don't have the guy that just finished working at the bank coming over looking. Well, maybe you do, looking for a job.
You do now. Yeah, you do now.
Yeah, maybe now you do. But I mean, a lot of the people that are already doing this want to, already have a vested education interest are using them, using cannabis for whatever as well, right? So you find a lot of the bud tenders are quite, knowledgeable when you do go into the dispensary.
Well, for sure, and they've got a passion, right? Otherwise, there's no way they would be applying for a job at an illegal organization.
Right?
There's got to be something driving you to do that, and it's not money.
No, well, that's the unfortunate thing too. Like if they regulate them, then people could have like great wages and benefits, and and be paid well for their job, and that's what they're what I feel they should be doing. But of course, you've got the government saying shut them down, like.
Well, yeah, and then you end up also creating this situation where it's a race to the bottom, where like what we see here in Vancouver is a bunch of people, the process has taken too long, it's been too restrictive, and we see a bunch of people just going, you know what, we're just going to open a dispensary anyway. Once they kind of do that, there's less and less reason to follow other best practices, right? And think, well, why not just sell to everybody? Well, why not? Offer happy hour specials or welfare day specials. And I mean, there's a place for those things, but what ends up happening is you get the lowest common denominator in dispensaries and places like that.
Right. And I mean, it's a really hard, trying to keep everything centralized. I know there's the Canadian Association for Dispensaries. Like it's a group that did come together with Dana Larson and yourself. You're involved in that too, where you guys tried to go out and set some certain standards down for the dispensaries to follow, right?
Yeah, well, medical dispensaries. I mean, that's one of the issues is that it was medical, not really recreational. I mean, obviously, a lot of the stuff in there would apply to both. But it was pretty specific medical. And yeah, I mean, that was the goal, was to try and, at the time when it was first founded, just before I joined the organization, there were 35 dispensaries in the country. That was it. And within a year, there were 35 in Vancouver and pretty much none anywhere else except for a handful. Yeah. And then a year later, of course, the numbers just started growing, which some of us knew was going to happen. And others really, when Harper came in, they were sure that dispensaries were finished, Right. That was the news story over and over and over again for like 8 years. So, a lot of people believed it, but those of us that kind of were on the ground and saw what was happening knew dispensaries weren't going anywhere.
No, and more were coming in. Now, with the ones that are... And with the ones that are selling 19 and over now, like they seem to be, like, I mean, sure, they went in kind of hard and heavy on a couple of them, like Shirley out in Halifax, and with Mark and the 8 that were in Montreal and the ones in Toronto, like but they kind of backed off now for a couple weeks, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what's going on in Montreal in particular, where they're now looking to do LP signups, which is an interesting kind of take. They've also opened one here in Vancouver just recently. Which, obviously they can't apply for the city bylaws yet for it, and I don't know if they're intending to. So, lots of interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, it is, and precedent setting for the rest of the country, hopefully. But when you think, well, Vancouver is the model, Victoria especially too. Like Victoria seemed to kind of has really taken a really laid back stance on let's let them run and keep them regulated. I think Victoria is a little more laid back than Vancouver, even.
In most ways, yeah, in most respects. I mean, they were, they didn't have coastal health coming in against edibles, so they've got edibles. They've got provisions for smoke lounges. I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, but, Vancouver Island Compassion Club has gotten one. So, there's in some ways it's a lot looser. In other ways, they're very strict. They don't want 19 plus. They want medical. So, what happens when legal comes in to their strictly medical program remains to be seen. But yeah, in most ways, it was definitely an improvement over Vancouver, and that's what we're expecting to see. As each municipality comes out with bylaws, we're hoping that they're just a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Right.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, with the legalization too coming in, where the government basically said they're going to kick it back, right?
Sorry, you're breaking up.
Forefronting. Oh, hang on. Forefronting, like most of this, like it's all kind of come from BC. Like, and I did, Alberta, right? And Alberta had macros. It was the only dispensary that we had in Alberta. And then they were, busted as well, right? So, and I
Yeah.
don't think there's anybody, I'm not sure, because I mean, anybody that is running in Alberta is just quiet. Like nobody says
Yeah, well, exactly.
anything.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what happens, right? And it's like at places that people think there isn't a dispensary, there probably is one. It's just really quiet.
Yeah, and absolutely. Like, I mean, I'm not even going to, I don't think it's made any bones. I mean, I do what I do, and I have to keep doing because there's people here that need that, right? Like, there's just absolutely no way they can make it anywhere else. So,
Yeah.
and I battle with it every day, but it's something that I feel that needs to be done. So, I really give kudos to the people that are out there on the front lines, in their storefront, standing firm, against
Totally.
the Liberal government. And unfortunately, like, this legalization talk that got them into office, like, I just want to chew my tongue sometimes.
Well, it's politics, right? And so they're not trying to convince people that already like legalization. They're trying to convince people that don't like legalization. And so, that's always what ends up happening. That's what happened to the Vancouver bylaws. Some of the original bylaw drafts did include edibles, for example, and a few other things that ended up getting moved out. But that's the problem with legalization in general. It's like you're going to start treating it the way you treat everything else in our society, then we've got problems because we don't treat everything else very well in our society, right? We haven't figured things out perfectly yet with other stuff, and rather than trying to with this product, what I see is trying to hammer it into a mold of something that we've already done very poorly,
Right. Well, it's like, prohibition on anything. They've done everything poorly. Like, even I think there was a bust I heard here recently, cigarettes coming across the U.S. border because we're right along, Roosevelt and Kingsgate, and they busted a couple people bringing cigarettes across the border. And I'm like, you guys are still looking for people for cigarettes when you got fentanyl and meth, and you guys are busting people for cigarettes. Okay.
Yeah, well, there's tax money there, right? So you're gonna spend your resources where you're gonna get some benefit, and being able to say, we busted this much dollars worth of this, and it's like, yeah,
I know. It's the bureaucratic bullshit, like straight up.
Yeah.
Like, it's all bullshit.
And that's the problem with legalization, and that's what I was referring to earlier. It's like once you actually bring it into the mainstream, you have mainstream problems.
Yeah. I agree on that one because, you have to convince soccer mom that it's not going to, affect her in a detrimental way, right?
Well, yeah, and if you look at, like, for example, like the vegetable market, we're only now starting to realize that, hey, locally grown and produced stuff is better for you. And that took how many years for us to just start getting to that point? And then we come along to cannabis and go, let's do the same thing we did with corn,
Yeah.
Like, why?
Exactly.
No, that didn't work.
No. And that's the thing, that wanting to, put it in with the liquor stores. Like, that doesn't work either. It's like putting apples with oranges, or comparing them. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's an odd one too, because even that, their reasoning around that sounds not too bad. It's like, the private liquor store in particular, the union there, they were saying, well, you could apply for a license and then not sell alcohol, and they were looking at this kind of model where you could sell one, you could sell the other, or you could sell both, but all of them would be licensed under their kind of body, which is similar to what happened in Washington State, where they put it under the Liquor Control Board. But of course, that whole administration had to change. They're actually now the Liquor and Cannabis Control Board. So even that idea didn't really pan out all that great. They didn't save money by sticking it into an existing ministry. They had to actually double the size of the industry.
Right. Well, we're going to take a quick break right now, and we'll come back to that where we left off there. We are going to be, back in a minute. So I'm going to thank my guests, or my sponsors today: Remo's Nutrients, 12 High Chicks, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners, Haley Rose Foundation, Mom, Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana, Mary Jane's Alternatives. And we'll be back after High as Fuck by John Loge.
Hi, it's Deb from BMA Hydroponics. Whatever you are growing, from vegetables to medicinal cannabis, we have everything you need to succeed. From seed to harvest to processing and extracting, we carry all the brand name products that will help you produce, process and consume high-quality medicine. Our knowledgeable staff of qualified growers have decades of experience with home production and all possess either MMAR injunction status or an ACMPR registration certificate. We offer the largest variety of products available anywhere, and if you don't see what you're looking for, just let us know and we'll find it for you. Visit our store at 404 Maitland Drive in Belleville, Ontario, or visit our website at bmahydroponics.com. We can be reached at 613-967-9888, Monday to Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/BMAHydro and drop us a line at BMA. Our motto is your success is our success.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Have you ever watched the sun go down and you're thinking about the world spinning round? Have you ever been high as fuck? You're in the bathroom mirror talking to yourself and your dog's looking at you like you need help. Have you ever been high as fuck? Then you feel your heart pumping really fast and you're convinced that you're gonna have a heart attack. Have you ever been high as fuck? You close your eyes and you're on a chicken farm. The only problem's that the chickens have human arms. You say that's fucked up, why do the chickens have human arms? You need snacks so you walk to the corner store, but you're scared because you think that they will know you're high. So you walk around the block to buy some time. You finally decide to go in the store, but you're so high you don't know why you're there anymore. So you just buy a pack of gum and get the hell out of there. You're walking home and your mouth is dry. You should have bought some juice and snacks, but you were too high. Thinking about ketchup chips, and for some reason the game Battleship. You start thinking about how fun it was to play games like Battleship when you're a kid, and how as we get older we forget how to play and just to enjoy ourselves. So you say, guess what, I'm going to make up a game right now, and it involves a baseball bat and a porcupine, and I'm going to try to kill a porcupine with a baseball bat, but then you don't know where to find the porcupine, so you go on eBay and you do a search, but people don't sell porcupines on the internet, and you say, you know what, world, you got me cornered again, I'm going to roll another joint. Ever eat a whole bag of crackers that were so old that they weren't crispy anymore? Have you ever been high as fuck?
Well, I wish I was a little more medicated, because then I wouldn't maybe feel like I was, I don't know, running a race this morning. Sorry, guys. So welcome back, Jamie. We'll get back to what we were talking about. We were kind of been discussing dispensaries and the dispensary regulations and what differences and stuff are between. But how do you see the future looking as far as like smaller, or do you see it being more? Do you see it being less? What do you see the future looking like?
I think we're in for a little bit more patchwork for the next little while. I mean, you know, once the Liberals are expected to introduce something in the spring, how long that's going to take to get through Parliament, who knows? Could be a year, could be longer. And then once it goes through Parliament, we're going to see a whole bunch of things downloaded to the provinces. That the feds only have jurisdiction over so much. The provinces are going to have jurisdiction over a lot more. So what's happening on the provincial level is a lot more important than people are realizing. And with an election coming up here in BC, you know, we have a chance to make this an election issue. So it'll be interesting to see how the parties come out on this.
Right. That's in March we have, or May. May the election
I think
is,
it's
right?
May, yeah, but you should start hearing about things a little bit more accelerated in March for sure.
Well, I know we've just had our MLA here retire, Bill Bennett, and they've got a new one that they've already elected in to go in for the election. His name's Tom Shapika. I'm supposed to be meeting with him in the next week or so about another issue, but I plan on slipping the cannabis right at him. Like, what's your stance? Because I've asked him a couple times on his Facebook page and have, been deleted. That's where I'm kind of getting his stance on it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, this is going to be one of the biggest issues for provinces coming up, and I don't think they realize it, but it's going to be a pretty big task on their plate. And then, of course, it's going to then get downloaded to municipalities as well, because things like land use, they're not in provincial jurisdictions. So, we could end up seeing some sort of patchwork. Also, kind of getting back to what we were talking about earlier with the Liquor Control Board, they had done some really interesting studies here in BC where they were, there's 7 dry communities right now in BC that don't sell alcohol. And one of the things that their poll had found out was that a couple of them would have been interested in selling cannabis, but still wouldn't be selling alcohol. And so we may see something like that, too, where there are jurisdictions within a province where cannabis isn't actually legal. So that is still a possibility.
Right. Well, I know there's dry towns in Alberta as well, so that could be something else that people look at too.
For sure.
But in Alberta, like I said, I can't really compare because Alberta's privatized a lot of things, right? It being an entity kind of separate, right? So with their liquor boards, it's all privatized now. So cannabis and liquor, they're still regulated under the provincial government in some sort of way, but anybody can apply for a liquor license and open a liquor store, right?
Yeah, and it's similar here in BC. I mean, we've still got the big public ones as well, but there's also the private liquor stores also that people can apply to open. So it's coming. Deregulation in every industry is kind of coming to a degree. It's going to be interesting times, that's for sure.
Do you see it's going to be overregulated or just, that's kind of where
hard to say. I mean, it's going to be overregulated. To what degree, who knows? Whether it's overregulated to the point where the whole thing falls apart, or whether it's overregulated to the point of annoyance. That we don't know yet. But we do know.
Well, even Vancouver's regulations for their dispensaries are almost to the point of ridiculous. No.
Yeah, absolutely, and more so than that, the process they're using is like an existing process for existing businesses. So from their point of view, they're like, well, this just makes sense. We're treating them like any other business. The problem is they aren't any other business, and it's a new thing where all of these existing businesses are coming through the process, and that's where we're seeing most of the problems with Vancouver.
And then Victoria is totally different as well. Then you got... Like I said, that's you're right. It's going to be such a patchwork because each municipality is going to have their own their own regulatory system, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, they can also municipalities can introduce bylaw inspectors for people that want to grow. So the government can say, yeah, sure, you grow, go ahead. But then your local municipality says, oh, well, if you want to grow, you got to get a license to do this, and we've got to come and inspect your site, and we've got to do this and that. And so, I mean, we will be seeing some sort of differences in regulations. It's not going to be one monolithic thing from coast to coast or even within a province.
Yeah, and that will be a problem because you're always going to have one area be able to get to do even with the edibles, right? Some can, some can't. It's just that's
the kind of thing that can be sorted out with federal guidance and a little bit more, or even just provincial, right? Like if they do something like a serving it right certificate, for example, or food safe course. That can be addressed that way. The major problems right now is that the only governments actually doing anything to legislate this stuff don't have that within their power to legislate edibles, really, right? So it's that hopefully will change. But again, hard to say how regulated it's going to be. If you look at the licensed producers, great, they're allowed to make oils now, but the oils are so capped that they're not really useful for most people. So that's an example of how the overregulation can actually make it useless. Right.
Well, yeah, the licensed producers too with recalls. like on a regular basis, you're seeing them, being recalled for pesticides, and you have to wonder, like, what are they using?
Well, I mean, this is an issue that a lot of people didn't see with the MMPR very early on, and it's it's a good thing that there's recalls happening. That does show that it's working. The problem is that the pesticides that are even allowed for use, the ones that are approved, are ones that are okay for like herbal supplements and things like vegetables. You're told to wash that stuff off of your fruit before you eat it. You can't really do that with cannabis. And they've never really tested those fertilizers for inhaling or what happens when you heat it up. So even a lot of the approved pesticides that they're allowed to use right now may not be that safe.
Right. That's absolutely true. Like, really, you buy something off the shelf, you think that it's supposed to be exactly what, is going into your plant, but how are you supposed to know if it's never been tested before either?
Well, exactly. And like I said, I mean, you're testing it for eating it and testing it for smoking it are two completely different things. And we haven't really cared much for anybody that smokes anything. We don't really test that stuff, right? Like,
right.
Tobacco is a perfect example. There's all these studies on tobacco. I've never seen one on tobacco that was grown naturally, cured naturally. The only studies I've seen are on the commercially available tobacco that's got like 400 and some chemicals in it. So how much of those harms are from the chemicals and how much of them are actually from the tobacco? We actually don't know because we don't really care.
Right, absolutely. Because and we haven't had the access to the studies because they just have turned a blind eye to studying it. Period. They just didn't want to study cannabis at all in any way, shape, or form.
Whatever. Yep, totally.
And now they're kind of getting no choice because there are studies being done in other countries. I think there are probably some being done here. We just might not hear about them all. But I mean, in reality, you've got how many people in Canada that use cannabis for medical purposes that aren't dropping dead like flies, and they're showing benefits to it. I don't know how much more proof they actually need that it's medical.
Well, I mean that's the other thing too, right? It's if you've got an immune compromised system, then those things are going to be a bigger deal. So. It's hard to say, no one's dropping like flies, but there may be people that are getting complications or, things like that from cannabis that we're not really aware of yet because they don't result in death like it does for other drugs.
Right. And I mean, drug reaction too, like, comparably to pharmaceuticals can be deadly if you have an allergic reaction to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a thing that hopefully we'll be seeing more information on as well. But there are certain things that cannabis is going to counteract. If you're taking a medicine to do something and the cannabis strain you're smoking does the opposite, then, you're actually decreasing the effectiveness of your other medicines. So there's a lot of research and work still to be done on things like that.
Right. Well, that's why I always recommend to people that ask me, like, I said, what is your medical doctor? Like, what do you want? Like, what else, pharmaceuticals are you taking? Because I don't want to direct anybody, into something, like I said, it's all personal choice, but I always say, what is your, we talk to your own general practitioner first. And most of what they're getting out of their doctors is, no, we're not signing. Sorry, we can't help you. So. Yeah. But, it's still important. There's, I know so many people that have been on cannabis for a long time, and they didn't get access to their doctors, but they eventually ended up telling their doctors, and that is huge because there are more and more doctors now that are seeing their patients on cannabis, seeing the benefits that it has, and they're more and more willing to work with them. That's really, unfortunately, one of the extra jobs that patients have that use cannabis is you've got to educate your doctor most of the time. Right. Absolutely. But, it's hard for some of them because some of them don't even want to talk to their own doctors about it. I've got a couple here that say their doctor says don't want to hear about it. So when you get into that situation with your GP, like, where does that leave these people? Like, it's such a hard thing for them to have to, deal with the fact that they want to use cannabis. They have been using cannabis. They want to go and get a diagnosis even from this doctor so they can go see, say, another doctor from a clinic, and they just get shut right down. Now, you do have rights, to walk into your clinic and get your medical records anyway. But,
Absolutely, you do. Absolutely, you do. They're your medical records, and you have the right to them. And the other issue around this is the colleges. They're the big roadblock because, even doctors that would be interested in hearing about it don't want to because they don't want the college to know that they've had anything to do with cannabis. The colleges right now, most of the provincial colleges actually don't allow doctors to write prescriptions for the medical document for licensed producers. They're actually recommend that doctors don't do that, and that the most they do is write a letter saying, the patient reported cannabis is okay. The odd thing about that is that's paperwork dispensaries will take. That's not paperwork that licensed producers are allowed to take. So you've got this really weird thing with the colleges saying, no, we're against pot. But the reality is what they're actually recommending is that doctors send their patients to dispensaries rather than licensed producers.
Right. Well, I think I've never actually, talked to anybody that out of a licensed producer. I've never had the need to, right? I don't have a licensed producer, right? So I've never actually spoken to anybody at any of them. So I don't know if anybody's educated on the other end. I assume that the consulting that they've had, from the cannabis community would make it so that actually they have been educated well enough on the strains to know, what to prescribe or what to recommend for people.
Yeah, that's a big question, right? Because right now most of that seems to be done through call centers. And it's hard to say what kind of care or follow-up you're going to get. I think they're sort of looking at it like, well, your doctor signed off on it. It's your doctor's responsibility. But that's not really the way that's worked in practice over the last 20 years because they're not the ones that have the knowledge.
No. And the doctors, a lot of them don't, you see them via whatever Skype, or you go into them and you see them once kind of a year to get your prescription filled out. And you don't follow up with that doctor either. You go back to your own doctor from, that's been taking care of you, that refuses to sign your paperwork. And they don't know what's really going on because either you're not coming back as regularly because the cannabis is helping you, so then they don't see you as often either, right?
And if you've gotten some sort of bad feeling from them, you're not likely to tell them, oh, no, I'm doing much better because I'm on cannabis now.
Right. Now, most dispensaries offer a doctor to service as well, right? Out in Vancouver, are most of them connected? So if I haven't been out to Vancouver for many years either. And when I was out there, we didn't go to the dispensaries because at that point in time, I think they were closed. It was night when we were in downtown Vancouver. But can you go into it and just, I need a doctor and have that ability?
Yes and no. More used to. BC recognizes doctors of Chinese medicine. So there were DCTMs that were prescribing naturopaths or something that we've always believed should be able to prescribe a plant medicine. So most dispensaries would take prescriptions from naturopaths, but again, it was the same thing. They ran into trouble with the colleges. And it was this really weird thing where on the one hand, you're providing a service for patients. On the other hand, it looks like you're just signing people up for yourself. And so it actually put the doctors in a bit of an uncomfortable position. So most places don't do that here anymore. But there's also a lot of 19-plus ones now, too. So now you don't even really need it.
Right. Okay, we're going to head to another break. And we'll be right back. I'd like to thank my sponsors, Remo's Roots, 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners, Haley Rose Foundation, Mary Jane's Alternatives, MUM, Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana. I'd also like to mention that Macros is having a fundraiser this weekend, which is Sunday, January the 22nd. You can check out their Facebook page for all the details. Our next song is going to be Good Old BC Smoke by the Hicks.
The following is a public service announcement from the Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society. The Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society is a non-profit organization dedicated to ensuring improved access to therapeutic cannabis and cannabis byproducts in Canada. With a federal government that has committed to legalizing cannabis, we feel it is our duty to ensure that the medicinal use of cannabis doesn't get lost in the process and that there are clear distinctions made between the medicinal and recreational use of cannabis. It is our mission to ensure that government regulation doesn't get in the way of a sick, disabled, or terminally ill person's right to use or produce this amazing natural health product. If you would like to get involved, you can contact us on the internet. www.canadiantherapeuticCannabisPartners.com, on Facebook, CTCP Society, or search Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners.
This is Bubbles from the trailer park, and they're playing some fucking excellent music on lifestyleradio.ca. I hope I didn't sound too nervous there.
Please hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
He's 2 hours late. That's some serious ass BC weed. Dang, boy, wait a minute. We got some video to shoot. You're 2 hours late.
I forgot.
What the you forget?
Can't remember.
That's 'cause you forgot. Roll us a damn joint. We got some video to shoot.
Okay, well, all right, I will.
I said roll us a joint, not do a ball hit. We got some video to shoot. All right, boys. Now, don't forget, I'm the director. Billy, grab your guitar. Gabby, grab your guitar. All right, boys, let's do it. Hey, hi, up there, it's in the air. It's BC, but tonight the pressure blows and the embers glow as they give the bong a light. The buds they grind, I do find this shit's really insane. The crowd it roars, 'cause Bobby scores some BC Mary Jane. Oh, the good old BC smoke is the best smoke you can toke. And the best smoke you can toke is the good old BC smoke. Hey, second verse. Where the potheads stash the greatest hash with buds they do grind. They roll 'em fat like baseball bats for 20 all the time. They grow like trees with bumblebees. They smoke 'em with a burning flame. So crystal white, it's dynamite, the BC Mary Jane. Oh, the good old BC smoke is the best smoke you can toke. And the best smoke you can toke is the good old BC smoke. Oh, the good old BC smoke is the best smoke you can toke. And the best smoke you can toke is the good old BC smoke. Third period, last joint in the bag. Oh, take me where the potheads go, and the weed it smells like skunk. And have a treat, made to eat, a butter made from bunk. Oh, spark a bowl and torch the knives, take that doobie down. Roll a blunt of BC skunk, 'cause it's the best bud ever found. Oh, the good old BC smoke is the best smoke you can toke. And the best smoke you can toke is the good old BC smoke. Oh, the good old BC smoke is the best smoke you can toke. And the best smoke you can toke is the good old BC smoke. Yeah!
All right. That's a really awesome song, Al. Welcome back, Jamie. We're going to go back to what we were talking about with dispensaries and what you might have going on in the near future, since we're looking at ahead and hopefully for, sunnier pastures for everybody that does run a dispensary in this country.
Yeah, well, I've been helping dispensaries get through their Board of Variance processes here in Vancouver. We've got variances for a bunch of people, a couple more still to go. That's when they've gotten denied from the first part of the process, and then they have the right to appeal. So we've been doing that. I've been doing, you mentioned the Nanaimo trip earlier, so I'm still talking to different councils around BC on implementing dispensary regulations, and I'm doing some stuff that I can't really talk about yet, but pay attention to the provincial election coming up, because there might be some interesting things there in terms of supporting local and promoting BC smoke.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things going on right now with the provincial election going on in this province, and hopefully things moving forward with that precedent kind of setting stuff, right? And we knew that, like, BC's always been kind of the center of I guess, cannabis because of the BC bud, right? Everybody across the country knows of that. Some of the best growers are out here.
Around
But
the
let's not
world,
discredit the rest of the country too. Like, I'm not going to say that there's not great growers in every province, because this country really has come a long way, considering the last 10 years when it comes to having a medical program, losing a medical program, reintroducing another medical program, getting another medical program. How 2 court cases, like iconic precedent-setting court cases. So in the last 10 years, we've really moved forward in some direction, positively in some ways and not so positively in others, right?
Yeah, just especially in just like the last 3 years.
Right.
There's been a lot of movement in the last 3 years.
Right, and being with Allard, giving the patients back their ability to grow, but then again, we still have that doctor gateway, and it's as like Russell said last week on my show, everything that we've gotten has come through the courts, right?
Yep.
Yep. Everything.
Well, and not just the courts. I mean, it's literally been it's not been top down on anything. It's been the exact opposite. I mean, the courts are really the grassroots sort of level, and then you move up the next level, and it's municipalities, and they're moving on it. And then you move up the next level, and it's provincial governments, and that's where BC's really sort of dropped the ball in my mind. It's like, it's a huge economy, it's a huge issue for BC, and our current our current provincial government hasn't really said anything about it one way or another. The only time Christy Clark ever mentions cannabis is in relation to fentanyl. So,
right.
We may need a change in government here to actually see something happen, but. That's if we can even just make it an election issue and make it a conversation, we can maybe push people that are opposed to it a little bit more towards the pro side.
Right, and that's something that people in BC should be looking forward to in the next 4 months, 6 to 4 months.
Absolutely, it's going to be huge. I mean, the next government that we have is going to be in for 4 years, and that's when all of the work is going to be done around legalization and what it looks like in the province of BC. So it's for cannabis activists, this is one of the most important elections I can think of, on the provincial level.
Right. Absolutely. So if you're in the, involved and you're Women Grow, you're involved with them still too, right?
Yeah, I follow the organization and I support the organization. I'm not sure what's going on with Canadian chapters right now, but I stepped down as chapter chair about a year ago, I think, just before Miss D came on. And it's been a great thing to watch grow. I mean, you've been around long enough, but when I first came into this industry, there were, events were 95% male. And there were so many women in the industry that I never saw at industry events. And the first time we had a Women Grow meeting, I met even more women that I didn't know were in the industry because they just stayed home and doing their thing. So to watch how these events have changed over the last, just since the first Women Grow meeting has been huge. We're seeing, closer and closer to gender parity on panels, which we never used to see before. It's just the role of women in cannabis is finally starting to get some recognition.
Absolutely. I was sad to see that the chapter here was shut down or has been put on pause, and they had the one event out here in Cranbrook that was not greatly attended, but I mean I wasn't able to get there either, but it's good to see that we're coming together on different levels, like with different things changing, but way back to activism, like we're back to square one when it comes to pushing our provincial governments. So boots on the ground, I guess, is where we have to start back to our MLAs, I guess, back to the people that are running and for incumbents, and make it an election issue.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I know one of the parties is going to come out with a pretty friendly platform for us. And we'll see what happens with the others, whether they adjust their platforms to deal with it, but it's definitely something we want talked about during this election.
Absolutely. And that's something that everybody should be doing, if they can. Like, even if you're just sitting at home and can't get to your MLA's office, you can always write them a letter.
Exactly.
That's something that everybody can do. There's, emails are pretty, you're sitting on Facebook, you can even send them a message through Facebook, because most of them now have that. So, sitting back and being an armchair activist at this point in time is a good thing. Write as many emails as you possibly can.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the way it's going to be coming forefront, because like I said, there's a lot of disabled people that can't get out to their to the office of the MLA, but you can be effective by just writing them letters to the editor, letters to your MLA, letters to Christy Clark for that matter. Bombard her.
Yeah, and even just educational posts, right? Joy Davies' Facebook page has always been interesting to me for that, because she's just basically posting things to educate regulators, and that's sometimes things that we forget because we know things, we know that what issues are, and we know them so deeply that a lot of times we just kind of use shorthand. And people that aren't really steeped in cannabis culture the way we are don't really get that, right?
Right.
So it's good to go back to basics and explain some pretty basic things to people that really just haven't been paying attention.
Well, absolutely. And that's the thing, when you're going to talk to these people, you have to remember these people don't have a clue. Like, they're not educated like we are. Like, they think it's the devil's salad still, like some of them. Like, seriously, like, reefer madness really does exist still. Or they just think, I have no time for this. And that's, basically sometimes the attitude I got. I was like, I don't have time for this. I got other things that are way more important, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like, but actually not so much. I mean, yeah, there are things that are more important, but most of those things can be helped somehow through cannabis, right?
Absolutely.
One of the things that's been really interesting for me was the liberal platform that they ran on. They ran on legalization as an issue. They ran on a whole bunch of other issues that they didn't incorporate into their cannabis stance. They said, we want to increase the middle class. Okay, great. So are you going to do that with cannabis? No, apparently not. We want to create more opportunities for women. Great. Are you going to start training programs for women in cannabis? No, probably not. So it was fascinating to me to kind of watch this and see that every single platform thing that they put forward could have been achieved with cannabis, and yet they never mentioned any of that, right?
Right. I think there are a lot too many, how do you put it nicely, staunch that don't really even want to deal with it. Like, I hate to say that, but I think they just want to turn a blind eye. Okay, yeah, we threw that out there. Yeah, we're going to legalize. Yeah, we'll get them off our back. But then he turns around and says, we're not doing this to please the recreational user. So really, like, what are you doing it for? Was it just to blow smoke up people's ass? Did you actually have it,
Yeah, again, this is the politics part of it, right? It's like, no, they're not doing it to please recreational users because the recreational user already voted for them for legalizing cannabis, right? So that's not the demographic they're trying to really get right now and win over to their side. So there is that, but there's also the idea that they look at it as its own issue, as its own little box, and they don't. Like, for example, we've got all this fentanyl crisis that's just getting worse and worse and worse. And we've got studies that have been done here for like a decade now on opiate replacement. There's been studies other places done on opiate replacement, yet nobody is talking about, hey, maybe we could try and get people off of opiates with cannabis, and maybe that'll help our fentanyl crisis, right?
Right. I know.
And it's, sorry?
I know, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and especially here, one of the reasons why dispensaries started in San Francisco and Vancouver first is because they were areas that had a very high HIV problem, and most of it was intravenous drug use. There was large communities in both Vancouver and San Francisco, as well as large gay communities that were hit very hard with the HIV virus. And that, one of the first ones in San Francisco was HIV patients setting up the dispensary for themselves. So, it's not like we don't know that this can't help. It's not that we don't know. It's just that, our regulators don't seem to know or don't seem to care or can't seem to connect the dots properly.
Yeah, it's not like it's been, not there for, how many decades now? Like, right in your faces. Like, I don't understand. Yep. It's like, it's like, why? Why do we have to go to such lengths to have them see what, benefits it has? But when it comes down to it, it's dollars, money,
Well, and the power of stigma is, we talk about stigma a lot, but the power of it is phenomenal, actually. Like, here in Vancouver, when they tried to do the dispensary regulations, they were very worried about the Chinese community being very opposed to it. And it's interesting because it's really the Asian and Southeast Asian communities here in BC that are most opposed to dispensaries, which is mind-boggling to me because those are the communities that invented cannabis medicine. Those are the ones that have been using it for nutritional, medicinal, and spiritual uses for thousands and thousands of years. And all it took was an opium war, and now generations of them are just afraid of cannabis, anything to do with drugs. They don't want to have anything to do with any of it. So yeah, stigma can be a pretty powerful thing that's generational.
Wow, that's something that I wasn't aware of. Like I would have thought that they would be more embracing because it is a herbal medicine, right? I never even thought of it that way, and that is a huge community in that part of in Vancouver, right?
Yep, and that it's kind of monolithic to talk about it as a community, but what's most interesting about it to me is that it tends to be the ones that are most vehemently opposed to it are ones that have been here for a generation or two. They're people that are actually trying to conform to Canadian values, and part of that is, cannabis is a drug and it's illegal and it's bad. That's what they've been taught, right? And so it's a really interesting situation sociologically.
Wow, that's incredible. That's really incredible that our Canadian values have instilled taking away something that's culturally that they would know. That's
right. Well,
yeah,
and that's just it, and that's part of the whole colonization process, right? That was how do you get people to stop using Chinese medicine? Well, you make fun of tiger penises, and you make one of the 50 most fundamental herbs illegal, and you only talk about the really crazy stuff, and you don't actually pay attention to things like. There was a study out of the University of Beijing a couple of years ago that found that acupressure points might actually line up with the endocannabinoid system, which would be huge if that can get verified through other studies. That takes this, acupuncture and acupressure science that's been kind of ridiculed and for years, and actually gives it a basis of why it might work, which would be pretty huge.
Well, it's funny because my doctor was giving me trigger point injections and told me to go to acupuncturist in between. That's the first time I've ever, by a medical doctor, been told to get acupuncture.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. So, and like I said, because she's, pulling and dragging her feet, she doesn't want to sign my cannabis forms. Like, she's still like, yeah. But, to suggest that I go to alternative medicine is, was kind of amazing to me. So, maybe there's a kind of an alignment coming up with some of it, along the way with some medical and alternative kind of mixing and mingling together because, natural medicine's been here a lot, forever. So I don't understand where the split, kind of comes in, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're going way back now, but now we're talking religion, right? Because the same thing happened in Europe at one point where you had all these local healers that were doing really well. Most of them were very poor, illiterate. They were women. They didn't speak Latin. They spoke the local languages. And what you ended up with was this, religious body saying, nope, these are the only people that now know medicine. And the practices they were using at the time they don't resemble modern medicine at all. Other than things like leaching, which is still an FDA-approved treatment for some things, most of that stuff has been debunked and discredited ages ago. And who we now consider the father of modern pharmacology is actually a guy who went and found all the local healers and took everything they knew and put it into a book. And he was made fun and ridiculed for it. So it's like this has been a long-standing issue that literally has to do with colonization and institutionalization. And those things are difficult to talk about sometimes because it starts to get. Oh, well, you're white, what do you know about it? And it's like, well, study the history of Ireland, and you'll learn that the same thing happened to the Irish that happened to everybody else in the world at the hands of the same people, just as one example, right?
Right. Well, my dear, looks like our hour is just about up, and I would really like to thank you for coming and talking dispensary regulations and all kinds of other things, because I learned a lot today, because a lot of the stuff I wasn't really aware of, to be honest.
Oh, cool. Nice.
So I was,
Well,
so hopefully everybody else got get a little bit of education on, what goes on behind the dispensary walls kind of thing, right? And that's something that a lot of us I don't think understand, how much work goes into actually getting getting that license and getting that, set up done, and how hard it is to get it done.
It's true. It's a lot. Even once you get through the variants, there's still a bunch of work that needs to get done just to get into stage 2. So yeah, it's lots of work.
Incredible. Well, thanks very much for coming, and we'll have to have you on the show again.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you, and I'm going to thank again my sponsors, Remo's Nutrients, 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners, Haley Rose Foundation, Mary Jane's Alternatives, Mum, Maritime Regenerative Medical Marijuana, and just a reminder, too, that Macro's fundraiser is this Sunday, January the 22nd. Y'all have a great week. Bye. Y'all have a great week.
Tune into the Pace Radio Show and catch Kim Cooper, Debbie Stoltz-Giffen, or Allison Murden, along with myself, Al Grant, as we talk to Canadian and international cannabis advocates who are working hard to help patients and to end cannabis prohibition. Catch us live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at lifestyleradio.ca.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
So what are you doing? Nothing. Why not? Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website. Sounds like a cool website. Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it. You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show